From Acres USA, you are listening to the Acres USA podcast, a conversational podcast where we'll explore sustainable farming, regenerative practices, and the latest innovations in eco-agriculture with some of your favorite farmers and ranchers. I'm your host, Taylor Henry, the owner and CEO of Acres USA. Welcome to the Acres USA podcast. In today's episode, we're thrilled to have Steve Diver with us. With 40 years of experience as an extension horticulturist, farm manager, and soil consultant, including 18 years as an agricultural specialist with ATTRA, Steve brings a wealth of knowledge to the conversation. An accomplished lecturer and author, Steve has published extensively on topics like soil biology, composting systems, and organic crop production. Currently, he is the farm superintendent at the University of Kentucky's Horticulture Research Farm in Lexington. And today, Steve will guide us through the fascinating world of biofertilizers, how they work, why they're crucial for maintaining healthy soils, and practical tips for integrating these beneficial microorganisms into our farming practices. Whether you're a seasoned farmer or just curious about sustainable gardening, this episode is packed with insights that can help you cultivate a thriving ecosystem in your soil. So, Steve, thank you for joining us. How's everything going on the farm these days?
We're planting annual vegetables. We need to prepare the soil so we can make beds. We do both the direct seeding, direct transplanting into the soil. We also do plasticulture beds. But anytime we don't have a vegetable crop in the field, we're trying to keep cover in there. And cover crops have been described as the cornerstone of any kind of sustainable cropping system. And the reason is they perform multiple functions. They're covering the soil. They're providing living roots that live in the soil and feed the soil biology. They're preventing rain and wind erosion. They provide better trafficability. Just adding so many soil health benefits. You could write a book about, cover crops. So we just do that all the time. And also, even when we have beds in the field, we'll do living mulches between the beds and the alleyways.
What do you use for the living mulches?
Yeah, our living mulches, in the summertime, we use teff. It's a winter annual warm season. It's very popular with horse farmers. It's easy to establish. And Taylor, let me tell you, it's super ton. You see, it's interesting that there are 1.3 million seeds per pound of teff. And if you look at the forage establishment bulletins from Extension, they say, even on the seed label, it says put out 12 pounds per acre. And whenever you're doing a living mulch cover crops, we triple that rate at a minimum. So we will triple that and we'll get up to 36 pounds per acre. We want to get very fast, very rapid establishment of any kind of living mulch. That could be teff. In the wintertime, for example, in garlic, people plant, and in our part of the country, people plant garlic in the fall. And then it overwinters, grows in the spring. They harvest it in June, July. And for that, we put in perennial ryegrass and crimson clover. So there's something people can use for any kind of crop. In fact, I was at an organic farming conference years and years ago at Ohio Ecological Food and Farming Association. And there was a farmer who gave a talk, really similar to Acres U.S.A., an experienced farmer who'd been doing organic farming and cover crops. And his comment has always stuck with me. What he said is that no matter where you live or what kind of cropping system you're growing, there's a cover crop that will fit that situation.
Yeah, I think that we find that it's true. Every single person I talk to has different cover crops they're using in different parts of the regions for different reasons. What's it been like working in the university system while obviously having this interest in, alternative type farming? It's not always that popular in the university system. Obviously, you've been able to maintain a long career, but what's that been like? What kind of pushbacks have you received over the years?
Taylor, in my situation at the University of Kentucky has been really smooth. I've been really fortunate. I was doing consulting work down in Texas, and this job came open, and I was able to get it and came up here. And there's just a history of this farm. I've been here 11 years, but 20 years ago, they started the organic farming unit here, and it's just grown and grown and been very successful for a few different reasons. we've gotten support from our department chair. We got support from the dean of agriculture. And one of the real key things that our farm has done, and what I have advised other university farms to do, is local food type events. So when we do on-farm event, some kind of a special occasion or celebration, we involve local chefs. We get produce from this farm and maybe from a few other farms, and it's all local food. It's all prepared by local chefs, including bread ovens, and people come, they experience the ambiance, and they see it. It's very obvious. The other thing is our CSA, or UK CSA, has a program that integrates students. So in the University of Kentucky, like a lot of other colleges, offers a 4-year degree in sustainable agriculture. So it's a requirement of that degree that the students participate in an apprenticeship in a summer program, usually between their junior and senior year, on a farm in Kentucky. And most of them come here to this farm. So we have students involved. When we have visitors from other universities, we have USDA deputy secretaries and undersecretaries. We have foreign dignitaries that come. They bring them to this farm because we have so much going on. There's so many dynamic things and moving parts, and the students are involved, and people like to see that. So I would say, honestly, I have not had any.
What's the most rewarding?
I have not had any pushback.
That's good. What's the most rewarding part working with the students, who I'm sure come from a diverse background of agriculture? Are you able to, do you have some that come in that aren't that interested in it, or are you only working with the sustainable agriculture students?
Yeah, we have, it's kind of like, the people that come here are interested. That's why they've shown up out here. So in my situation, I have summer workers that are students, and so I have student summer workers, and it's always fun to have them on the team and get them involved, and show them a few things. There's a common perception in the public that if you want something done, you contact student groups to do some big project, and it's just not the way it works. Students are not really skilled enough to run this farm. We actually have very trained and skilled farm staff who run the farm and run the CSA, and the students plug in.
Yeah. Let's dive into the biofertilizers and their role in enhancing soil health. So how are you implementing some of these biofertilizers, and where did this research and interest originate from?
Okay, Tanner, sure. So I'm going to talk about biofertilizers at the Acres U.S.A. conference in December, again, up in Wisconsin. And I'm going to give a general overview based on my experience, more so from a soils consultant and someone who's teaching a class to a group of farmers. Now, we do have some biofertilizers here at the farm. I've got a little microbial lab. We actually currently have a microbial inoculant that we're brewing in there right now. I've got a few herbs in there, and this is a multi-purpose microbial inoculants. And then we also just started up a biofertilizer shed that we're going to do a little larger scale fermentations and barrels and things. So I'm not really going to be talking about so much like, all the things that we're doing. I really just want to lay out some of the really amazing things that are going on with biofertilizers in the world of regenerative agriculture, and put it into context and really provide kind of a framework and a toolbox so that farmers can understand this, to really navigate the complexity of all the different kinds, what's going on, and how to use them. So they can, have the concepts, have the toolbox to take home and use them.
Yeah. So what's the first place folks can start?
Well, first thing I think is really helpful let's just start with concepts around regenerative agriculture and how it has come into prominence nowadays. And, let's just start with Acres U.S.A. and what Charles Walters Jr. envisioned when he started the magazine, a little over 50 years ago. And his concept of eco-agriculture was that it was economic and environmental. It was ecological and economic. But based on my experience of attending many conferences, attending workshops and seminars with many of the consultants and authors, I break it down to the three pillars of eco-agriculture are minerals, biology, and biophysics. So if you look at the thread around soil health, it's always been a theme in Acres U.S.A. Organic matter management has always been a theme in organic farming. It's been a very fundamental theme in sustainable agriculture. In every kind of alternative farming system, you always hear farmers and pioneers talking about soil organic management. So in modern times, people have just summarized that as carbon farming, which is a really good way to think of it, is carbon farming. You're after building the soil organic matter and the living soil and the soil microorganisms that live in the soil and the cover crops, the living roots and everything. All that together is what carbon farming is. And it's so fundamental. It is so fundamental to any kind of regenerative and system, is understanding the living soil and soil organic matter functioning and soil microbial community functioning. And so when we talk about that, Alex Podolinsky was a biodynamic pioneer in Australia who talked about the humus law. And that's very interesting because the humus law says that you need 3 to 5% soil organic matter to have natural functioning and fertility of your soil. So it starts from there. You can walk through what is soil organic matter functioning, the biological, chemical, physical processes that are going on there, the soil microbial community functioning or the soil food web functioning, and the amazing amount of ecosystem services that you provide. So, we get into, when we talk about the living soil, what's really helpful to frame as the fundamental thing about plants and soil microbes is that they interact with plants in the rhizosphere and the phytosphere. So those are the three-dimensional soil community of organisms that interact and live with the plants in the root and leaf spheres. And then the vast, great numbers of ecosystem services that soil microbial community provides. They do nitrogen fixation. They do carbon fixation. You have bacterial and fungal decomposers. They're involved in phosphorus solubilization, zinc, manganese, every kind of mineral you can think of. They're involved in solubilizing and making those to the plants when the plants need them. They're involved in biocontrol of insects and pests. They generate organic acids. They generate enzymes. They do an incredible job of producing biotic slimes and glues or polysaccharides that stitch the soil together. And so these are just vast. There's a bunch of known and a bunch of unknown of these processes. So that's all very important. But the fundamental backbone to all of this are the biological farming practices that build and maintain soil organic matter or carbon farming. So that is everything relating to cover crops and multi-species cover crops, compost, organic mulches and crop residues, minimized tillage, livestock grazing, healthy manures, dung beetles, intercropping, biodiversity, soil building versus soil depleting crop rotations. Another one is the CNPS, the ratio of carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. So really it's this holistic emphasis on soil organic management to build the soil habitat for soil microbial community. And that's what carbon farming is. And that's why it's so fundamental to regenerative agriculture. And so, as a result, all these things from farmers in regenerative ag and organic farming have resulted in kind of a worldwide awareness amongst farmers about the living soil Soils that are spongy, they're humusy, they have earthy smelling, they're darker color, and they're just rich. So that's where farmers are making this link between soil health and food quality. So when you put it all together, all this leads to basically biological farming practices to build soil organic matter. So that's what people refer to as carbon farming, and it includes everything from cover crops to multi-species cover crops. People talk about compost, organic mulches, crop residues. Minimized tillage is a huge one. Livestock grazing is huge. Healthy manures, dung beetles, intercropping, biodiversity. Soil building versus soil depleting crop rotations. Things like carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus ratio. All of these things are basically a holistic farming emphasis on soil organic management to build the soil habitat for soil microbial communities to do all their work and all their ecosystem services. So that's the background to the soil health and regenerative agriculture. In other words, build it and we will come. That's the most fundamental thing. Biofertilizer is always going to be an add-on to that. You've got to have that in place to start with.
What have you seen? What's the easiest thing for folks to get started with that increases the biological activity?
And build it and it will come. Number one is cover crops.
Yeah.
If you're doing any kind of cropping system, that is it. That's the cornerstone of any cropping system. If you're working the soil, you're growing crops, no-till or till, either way, is adding in cover crops.
And for folks that say a dairy farmer that takes the manure off of out of the barn and just puts it right onto the field, what's something that they can do? I'm assuming it's more of the CNPS ratios. What additional thing could they do to enhance what they're putting onto their field?
Oh, now listen. So Taylor, when we talk about a dairy farm, some kind of a livestock farm, poultry operation, hog operation, we're talking about confined animal husbandry. Even in regenerative ag science or whatever it is, there's you still have animals confined in an area. This is where something like a microbial inoculant like EM, effective microorganisms, can function as a multi-purpose probiotic. And I've done this actually with farms, large-scale dairy farms. But if you think about this kind of system, you can think of upstream, downstream. And so at the early point of the life cycle of organic matter and livestock, you can introduce these microbes in the drinking water. You can spray them in a mist over the stalls, so it'll land on the animals' backs. It'll land on the bedding. It'll inoculate their gut microflora. It'll inoculate and bioremediate the bedding. It'll reduce odors. And then when the manure is pulled together, it's already there. And you can further go into some kind of a compost or even just whatever. It's a slurry into a lagoon or into just, manure spreader or compost. You've already got them pre-inoculated. So, you can see remarkable reductions in odors and flies and more or less the probiotic health of any kind of livestock operation.
Yeah. You want to dive into some of the soil microbial communities?
So we get into let's talk about a couple of other key concepts. So you have heard about the soil food web, and they know that there's microorganisms and there's protozoan nematodes, and you have all these different things living in there. But what's really important, and I've seen this over and over again in the biocontrol literature, is that really, if you want to just boil it down, what you're really after is the higher number and diversity of microorganisms. And so that is what, if you get this incredible population density and complex diversity of these soil microorganisms, that's really what drives soil functions, the soil structure and the soil fertility, disease suppression, all that kind of stuff. And then there's a really interesting concept that came out of Australia called MEND, MEND, microbially enhanced nutrient delivery. And what the MEND concept says is that the higher the number and diversity of microorganisms that lives in the rhizosphere and thymosphere, the more efficient you can get utilization of foliar and soil-applied nutrients. In other words, biology helps make these nutrients more bioavailable. And what farmers are finding out, the more they adopt these regenerative ag practices, the more carbon farming kicks into gear, the more ecosystems start happening, the more you can cut back on fertilizer. So people can start at 25%, they can get up to 70%, 75%, or even 100% reduction in nitrogen fertilizer and other types of fertilizer using carbon farming practices, which is wild. A lot of regenerative ag farmers say, "Hey, I don't want to buy fertilizer. I just want to do this."
Yeah, it's an incredible.
Now, that's not always feasible. It's not always feasible. It depends on the crops. It depends on where you are. It depends on where your farm's at. But it's not out of the question. And I will say that eco-ag, sustainable organic has always been around. There's always been farmers doing it. But I will say it's probably you have farmers markets all over the country, where farmers have been doing organic farming for decades. But a really big difference with regenerative ag is it has become much more accessible to broad acre and row crop farmers. And they have realized that the basic agroecological functions of carbon farming are the real deal. And so they've been able to take it and run with it. And they have the capacity, the wherewithal, and some financial resources to make it happen.
Yeah, I think it adds to the bottom line. There's no question about it. People that can eliminate or reduce the fertilizer bill is one of the biggest things that steer people into this type of farming. What else goes into some of the soil microbial communities?
Okay, so we'll talk about that. Let me do this. Let me give you another quick breakdown. We've been talking about build it, may become. That is all these carbon farming practices to build this organic matter habitat. And then let's get into the biofertilizer. So that's the first approach. Then the second one is brood and spread it. That's where these biofertilizers come into the picture. And so, again, these broadacre farmers are realizing that there's products you can purchase. There's a whole bunch of recipes you can brew yourself. And when you're doing some kind of soil work, you're drilling in seed, you can have some saddle tanks on your tractor, and you can inject some of this beneficial biology and carbon into the soil, get it next to the seed, get it next to the rhizosphere, and totally enhance the ability of the crop to function more naturally with reduced fertilizer.
So what's currently the process that you're using to develop some of these biofertilizers?
Okay, so that's a big topic. Let me kind of walk through a few things that I think are helpful to understand when we're talking about biofertilizers. So let me do that first. Let me just give you a few terms and definitions and paint the picture. And then let's talk about some of the specific alternative farming systems that are really well known, some of the biofertilizers that they're making, and then we'll give some options on what some on-farm brews that farmers can get into. But the one term that is really popular now, also really popular at universities, there's people investigating this all over the world, is biostimulants. And biostimulants are natural and biotic substances that include microorganisms. When they're applied to seeds and plants, they stimulate plant cellular processes and accelerate or enhance plant growth, nutrient uptake, nutrient efficiency, tolerance to drought, salinity, and abiotic stress. And they improve crop quality and crop yield. They have other Stimulatory effects such as increased water uptake, photosynthesis, and plant hormonal activity. So the key concept that people use when they talk about biostimulants is that they're non-nutritive and they're used in small amounts. They have a real stimulatory effect. So you're not really applying fertilizers, you're applying substances. So, humic acid, fulvic acid, those are really well known. Microalgae, yeast, seaweed, all those are known. Amino acids, organic acids, kelp, crab shell. These are the kind of things we're talking about. And part of that is that, for example, in the EU, in Europe, some of the regulations are driving the interest in biostimulants because they're saying that by such and such year, they want to phase out more pesticides and more fertilizers, at least pesticides. So there's a huge interest now in finding out things that could be substituted, for example, copper in vineyards and fungicides in crops and stuff like that. So, but the other one, the next one is biofertilizers, and they're kind of a biostimulant. They fall under that category because they have all the microorganisms, but they also can provide slow release fertility. So they're doing two functions. And even bulk aerobic compost and farm bokashi would be two good examples of biofertilizers that are providing all this great beneficial soil biology, but also slow release fertility. And then there's another term that kind of just throws it all together. There's just called biopreparations. So it's kind of like an A to Z manual of eco-friendly fertilizers and pest controls and bioenhancers when you get into all this kind of stuff. In what's driving the interest in farmers is all of the above. They're not really trying to break it down in some way. They're just finding out, hey, does this work? Let's try it. But on a worldwide basis, it's become huge. For example, in U.S.A. nature farming in Japan, that's the one that came up with EM, or effective microorganisms. There's the Korean natural farming that has come up with the indigenous microorganisms, or INMOs, and all the KNF recipes that include labs, or lactic acid bacteria, and various kinds of fermented plant extracts. Genadem low-cost organic farming is an offshoot in Korea. Also does various kinds of extracts, fermentations. All of these can be used to both stimulate the plant, provide slow-release fertility, and provide for some pest control. In India, you have both traditional Vedic Krishi type of preparations that go back 1,000 years, and you have modern zero-budget natural farming biopreparations. Those are very interesting. And then there's the other group I'll just throw out is just called peasant farming. And so these things have now become widely adopted across Asia, Latin America, Central America, and farmers in the United States are using them. So there's just a whole bunch of people who are inventing or adapting and modifying these recipes from Asia and making up their own recipes. So yeah, it's very interesting. There's a ton of these different recipes, all kinds of acronyms. And
Going back to some of the, sorry to go back a little bit, but some of the biostimulants, where can people source some of these things? I know you mentioned like microalgae, yeast, seaweed, things like that.
Yeah, so that kind of gets into another aspect of that. And so there's, Acres U.S.A. is a good example. You go to the trade show at Acres U.S.A., you'll see a lot of these products. It's really traditional to see humic acids and fulvic acids. There's various companies that are making algae. I can think of 2 or 3 that are really prominent. So for sure, farmers like to plug in and purchase and just use what's been available. Most of these products, you can assume that they're, real professional companies. They've got some science behind what they've developed. They got some proprietary formulas that have performed better, that they have figured out over many years. So when you buy something like that, they're very reliable. And sometimes you can purchase these things, for example, like EM is a mother culture. So you buy a liter of EM mother culture, put it in a 20-liter bucket with 1 liter of molasses, and now you're producing 20 liters of volume of the same microbes by growing
Yeah.
your own, doing a fermentation process. And
What's
then
the fermentation process like?
for EM,
Yep.
yeah, we're doing that right now. Actually, that's one of the microbes I've actually worked with quite a bit, going back to the mid 1990s. And that one, the EM, was developed by Dr. Higa in Japan. That's the one that's got lactic acid bacteria, yeast, and phototrophic bacteria. It usually also has actinomycetes. But that's the one. There's a couple companies out there that sell the mother culture, so you can buy the mother culture from them, either small scale or large scale. I'm working with some farmers this year who are done a really, really large scale activation and putting down on their broadacre crops and pastures. But in our instance, we just got a 20-liter fermentation kit that's usually normally used to, produce beer. So it's got an air mark with it. And so what we do is I get a propane stand and used for cooking outdoors. I get a large stainless steel pot. I put some, degassed or distilled water in there. I ran up to like 110, 120 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll turn off the heat. First, I'll put in some herbs. Then I'll put in some molasses. Temperature cools down below 110. I'll add in the microbes. So the recipe is 1 to 1 to 20. So you need 1 part of mother culture, 1 part of molasses, and 20 parts total volume of water. So I got a little 20-liter brewer. But you can do this on a scale. You can do a 1-gallon jug. You could do a 5-gallon bucket, 7-gallon bucket. We do 30-gallon barrels, 55-gallon barrels, 275-gallon totes. You can do a 3,000-gallon tank. What's important, the opinion, is to have some way to keep that temperature at a fermentation temperature of 95 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 weeks. So you need a heat probe in for a large tank. In a small scaler kind of setup, which most farmers I'm dealing with are, doing, 5 gallons or 30-gallon barrels. The trick that I have found, which is amazing, is to go. I would just drive over to the waterbed stores, but now I just buy them online and have them shipped over here. Are waterbed heaters. Waterbed heater with the thermostat. It's perfect. You get some zip ties, wrap around your barrel. You're doing like small bucket or you're doing a 30-gallon barrel, just wrap it around the barrel, put some zip ties on there. You can add some insulation to it. Get your thermostat going, have a long handle thermometer, and get that temperature up around 95 plus or minus a few degrees, and let that ferment for 2 weeks. The pH will drop to 3.5. It'll have a sweet smell. It'll smell good. If you have an O or a P meter, oxidation reduction meter, it'll show incredible antioxidant power from the phototrophic bacteria. And so then you have just increased the volume 20 times from the original mother culture, and you have what is called activation. So we call that AEM, activated EM. And now that's ready to go because the mother culture is sleeping or is dormant. You've activated it. It's really busy now. You look at this on the microscope and you are looking at an ocean of biology. It's unreal. It's just, you talk about microbial density. It is all there. You can totally see this activity. The bacteria, yeast organisms swimming around doing their thing. And now this can be, now what's interesting is that a lot of people, a lot of farmers hear microbial inoculants and they immediately associate a microbial inoculant as a soil and crop inoculant. And what we need to get people to understand is that these biofertilizers have so many more functions. EM is a well-known human probiotic drink. And as long as you're brewing this at food grade level, you can drink this, and you can put some herbs in there and some fruit and concentrates in there to increase the flavor of it and do a probiotic drink. It can be used in livestock, drinking water, livestock feed. It's an incredible bioremediation for odors. So, for example, I've done several different kinds of institutional food composting. And one of the really basic requests that I have is that they integrate EM with the food waste compost because it's so powerful to reduce flies and odors. And anytime you have a large pile of organic matter like food waste or fish guts, these are known as highly putrescent materials. They will really rapidly break down and start causing odors and attracting flies. And the management process of adding these microbes to the system can completely shift that in a positive direction. So it really, instead of being putrefactive microbial pathway, it becomes a fermentative microbial pathway. So anyway, that can then this. The other thing that's really interesting is that, let's say you're starting with EM. But another thing is you can use these different recipes from a number of different systems. And so now let's say that we're going to use our microbial inoculant as an activator or as a starter. So now let's say we have some fish guts that we've gotten from the marketplace. We have some plant leaves on the farm. We have some fruit waste on the farm. You can put all that in a bucket, throw the microbes in there, throw some sugar in there, and now you can ferment the raw biomass material that you're working with and transform this raw biomass into a full-blown biofertilizer that is rich with biology and it has all these nutrients and bioactive substances that can then be used as a biofertilizer on the farm. It's really common to do dilutions once you get these prepared. And so even though, let's go back to our 20-liter bucket, that 20 liters can be diluted out. We might use it at, let's say on a crop. Let's say we got a 500-gallon tank. We're taking that onto a pasture or out onto a field that we've grown some row crops. So we're going to spray microbes, and maybe we're going to add some biochar powder in there or some humic acid. We got a tank blend. So now you can do a 1 to 500 dilution. So we can take 1 gallon of the microbial inoculant, put it in a 500-gallon tank. We got a 500 to 1 dilution we're putting out there.
What's mother culture?
That is the
that
inoculant that you purchase from one of the companies that sell it. Yeah.
Got it. Is there any targeted use with these different type of recipes? Like if you're deficient in something, you'd want to use this recipe over others, or are all of them kind of just, injecting biology?
They're totally adaptable to this kind of thing. So now when we get into the peasant farming system, this is really popular in Latin America. In Jairo Restrepo Rivera has an incredible book upon ABCs of organic farming, shit a la cartes. It's got a new version. It's English. It's got over 300 biofertilizer recipes, but there's a recipe out of Latin America called Super Macro. And so let's say you start with you've got your microbial inoculant. Another recipe people do in Latin America is you get a 200-liter barrel, or let's say a 55-gallon barrel, open top with a lid that you can seal. And you get your water in there. You put some raw manure in there, or put some ruin from cattle slaughter in there. Then you put in some yeast, put in some molasses. And in this situation, when you're talking about minerals, if you need boron, manganese, copper, you can put in small amounts of that into the recipe and let all this ferment for a couple weeks or 30 days. Put an airlock on top of it. And what happens in that process is these microbes grow and expand and proliferate to enormous quantities, and they produce organic acids. They produce these enzymes. The enzymes work over the rock minerals. Like you put rock phosphate in there, or wood ashes, or these trace elements in there. They work them over, make them more bioavailable, and chelate them. So now when you end up at the tail end is the biofertilizer mineral chelate. Now this can be used again in a dilution that could go in a foliar spray onto the crop or into, say, an irrigation system or fertigation system.
What's one that interests me I'm looking at here is the fermented forest litter. Have you made that recipe yet?
So that's in our biofertilizer shed that we have coming up, like in the next day, as soon as we can get to it. But we've got all the parts put together. So let's talk about this one. The fermented forest litter is an interesting one because everybody has access to a woodlot or a forest where you can go out and collect fresh litter, and we're after litter underneath the forest, not just leaves that fall on a tree. But we want the microbiology that you see with decomposing leaves and twigs. Gather all that up, take it back to your place, so, get a clean tarp or a clean floor. Now, for this one, you need to purchase a few other ingredients to make this work. And we've got all this, laid in. We've got some rice bran. We've got some whey powder. We have some wheat bran. Some of these things you can get from your local co-op. Some things you have to order in. But basically, you're going to take your leaf litter. You're going to get your dry ingredients like your rice bran and some whey, and get some water and molasses. Mix it all together until it's moist. There's kind of a recipe for that. And you basically get a huge amount of that and stuff it into a small barrel, say like a 50-gallon barrel. Or if you want to make a bunch, stuff it into a 30-gallon barrel and really pack it in there tight. See all these moist ingredients? The inoculum is your forest litter with the native microflora. And then your food sources are the rice bran and the whey and all that stuff. Maybe some wheat bran. And then you pack it in there. You're actually making a bokashi fermented organic matter that is now going to serve as a microbial inoculum. So that inoculum can turn around and be used in a liquid biofertilizer to make something like sucromagro. You could do the same. You could also take a little bit of that forest bokashi or mountain bokashi. You could take that and put it into a potting mix.
Do you have some examples of folks who have done this at larger scales, and what type of crops are they growing?
On a large scale, what's amazing is how far advanced this already is in Asian countries and in Latin American countries. So even though we're picking up on it, we're spreading around the United States. It's already at an advanced scale, at a very large scale in some of these places. So we're talking about warehouse levels, quantities of tubs, intakes, where they're making all these different kind of biofertilizers, either to use on a large plantation farm or to sell to local farmers. But yeah, I know there's places in the United States where people are scaling up and doing this kind of thing already.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What would be
as far as whatever crops, it doesn't matter. You could be doing pasture. You could do fruit crops, viticulture crops, row crops, vegetable crops. It's all the same. Regenerative ag is universal. So, you start with carbon farming, you build it and they come. You build the soil habitat. You encourage the population of soil structure, soil humus, soil organic matter, soil microbes to be living there. But the key thing about biofertilizers is tweaking. So, again, when you grow a crop, you have the rhizosphere. You have the ability to inoculate the seed or the root with some of these biofertilizers at the beginning of the crop life cycle. And then at certain stages of the crop, various V stages of corn or whatever, soybeans, you can add in some more foliars or more, irrigation, inject some more at critical life stages during the crop.
Do you have a favorite stage you like getting it on, or
the seedling stage is very important.
Yeah.
And then any kind of a change between the vegetative and fruiting stage is very important. And about a third of the way through the vegetative stage. So 3 times if you have the ability to do that.
Well, what would be your goal when folks walk out of your presentation at our conference? What are you hoping that they walk away with?
I want them to understand the connection between a regenerative ag, eco-ag based on building soil habitat with carbon farming practices, and then how these biofertilizers can be framed from these various alternative farming systems, and really how powerful they are to farmers. They can make their own. They can purchase a few products. Sometimes they're mother cultures and microbial inoculants or special kinds of algae or some specially prepared humic acids. So they have an option there to get some products from professional companies, and they also have options to brew and make their own.
Got it. What's one thing you would push people who haven't tried anything like this yet over the top? What would be the first thing, easiest thing for them to try?
Well, let's just start with a couple of them. So I talked about the EM and how simple that is. If you get the mother culture and some molasses and do a 1:1:20 recipe. Another one is LABS, or lactic acid bacteria serum. That'd be another one that's really simple. You just need some rice and some cheesecloth and some milk to make your own. You can make a whole bunch that way. It's interesting. I put stuff on my Facebook page, and just really as simple as, here's one that'll blow your mind. Something as simple as going to the store, buying a dry yeast package, making a 3% dilution. So 3 grams in 100 milliliters of water plus 3 grams of sugar. Activate the yeast, make a solution, and either spray it on their plants or do a soil drench. Something like that, simple as that, can function as a biofertilizer and get improved plant growth.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Steve.
So you
anything else?
You start with these simple ones, and then you get multi polycultural blends and mixes, and you increase the diversity and you increase the functionality of them.
All right. Anything else you'd want to leave our listeners with on this episode?
Yeah, I'll have a handout that I will have at the conference, and people can dig through that and sign more of these recipes that I'm referring to, and follow up a little more in depth.
Yeah, the handout is really helpful. It has all the ingredients and recipes and directions on how to make it. Have you guys been documenting with any videos at all while you've been making these?
Yeah, we're not big on video here. We're moving really fast over here. I do some photography with my phone, and I use them in workshops.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, Steve. Well, we're looking forward to seeing you in December. Where should people head to find out a little bit more about what you're doing and the work that you're doing?
Well, I'll have a webpage, hopefully, later this year, maybe by Acres, I'll have a webpage up and running at stevediver.com. But primarily, I just put stuff on my Facebook page, and it's public. So if anybody looks on Facebook, they can find me.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for joining us again, and we're excited to have you in December.
All right, Taylor. Thanks so much, man.
Thank you for listening to the Acres USA podcast, a podcast production of Acres USA. Find us on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, and other popular podcast platforms. Acres USA is North America's oldest publisher on production-scale organic and regenerative farming. For more than 50 years, our mission has been to help farmers, ranchers, and market gardeners grow food profitably, regeneratively, and with nature in mind. Find our books and other Acres USA media and learn about Acres USA events at acresusa.com. Read our online magazine at members.acresusa.com, and we'd like to thank Acres USA staff for their contributions to producing this podcast. This episode was edited and engineered by Weston Larson of Acres USA. We're grateful to our guests for taking the time to talk with us about their experiences.